Is your dig bad?
No.
Oh. Nice dig. I thought you said your dog did not bite.
That is not my dog.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 136 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're talking with writer-director Brian Presley, the driving force behind the Great Alaskan Race. If you're hungry for inspirational fact-based stories of people fighting insurmountable odds, Brian has the movie just for you. You know, the old heckler's veto is growing stronger in America, and the usual suspects are whisper quiet about it. We've seen this trend on college campuses for a few years now. It's captured beautifully in the new film No Safe Spaces, opening in Phoenix October 25th and before its nationwide rollout. Of course, the heckler's veto often involves leftists drowning out conservative speakers, either with drums or other musical instruments, or just chanting or screaming or yelling anything, any kind of loud noise to make sure they're not heard. Now, at its worst, though, violence rears its oh-so-ugly head with these situations. And that's starting to happen when it comes to right-leaning art. Now, earlier this year, we saw a play called FBI Lovebirds Undercovers. It's by Phelim McAleer, the conservative artist who often uses crowdfunding campaigns to source his material. Now, that play endured a violent threat against the theater where it was going to be staged. Well, the people behind the theater, and you can't really blame them, canceled the plans to rent out the space for McAleer's team. So another venue was found in the nick of time, and the show did go on, but it was closed for a while. Meanwhile, a few weeks later, little mini OC, the girl who makes fun of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, had to shut down her shtick on social media when her family received threats of violence just for making fun of AOC. Now, much more recently, a screening of The Rise of Jordan Peterson is under attack. Sounds familiar again once you hear the details. A Portland church is supposed to be screening the film, and the pastor connected to this church got a note about it. The note essentially said, "Don't screen this movie. If not, well, here's what part of the note says about what happens next. Pray on it if you must. Do the right thing. As much as we joke about it, we really don't want to have to bring out the guillotine to fix society." Close quote. It's pretty chilling, right? Well, naturally, the mainstream media has done very, very little to cover the situation. Par for the course when it comes to our biased press. And those brave Hollywood entertainers who are always talking about this or that when it comes to politics, you'd think they'd be raging against this attack on free speech. Well, you'd be wrong. They're quiet too. So what happens next? More threats? Actual violence? Well, until the media and the culture at large condones this behavior in no uncertain terms, anything is possible. Anything. And now here's the HiT tweet of the week. This week's winner is Andy Richter. Conan O'Brien's goofy and lovable sidekick is a hard-charging partisan on social media. But his latest tweet, it's probably funnier than anything he said on the show in recent memory. Here we go. Even if you loathe Hillary Clinton, you have to admit that she doesn't just spout off willy-nilly. She has measured every word for the past 50 years. Andy, Hillary just accused Tulsi Gabbard of being groomed by Russia to run as a third-party candidate in 2020 without evidence. Might want to go back in that tweet.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
This week's HiT tip of the week is Lenny. The 1974 film stars Dustin Hoffman as game-changing stand-up comedian Lenny Bruce. Bruce shattered comedy conventions again and again, and boy, did he pay the price for it over and over. Hoffman is exceptional here. You expect nothing less, but Valerie Perrine is just as good as Lenny's love interest. I think their on-screen chemistry and the what they had to go up against is absolutely fascinating. Two great performances. The film, watching it today, connects on a number of different levels. It's excellent. The script is terrific. The performances are across the board outstanding. But also you realize that Lenny's battles are far from over. As you watch in the movie, police officers used to attend his stand-up shows ready to pounce if he said the wrong words on stage. Today, well, social justice warriors serve that exact function, and they don't turn you over to the authorities, they just cancel your career. Lenny remains a terrific piece of art, a wonderful biography, and also a movie, even if you've seen it in the past, you need to watch it all over again. And good news, it's available right now on Amazon Prime.
Political Spirits, the weekly conservative podcast that says the left and right should have a few drinks and talk. The only podcast that intersperses commentary with the sound of pouring alcohol. Host Franklin Rye, an experienced governmental affairs professional, offers analysis, commentary, and conservative solutions mixed in with amusing anecdotes about the sausage-making process. Ever wonder how democracy is like a Chevy Suburban? Did the Beatles really write conservative songs? How a Democrat politician is like the Arquillians in Men in Black. Add to that occasional historical episodes with a patriotic bent, kept at 30 minutes or less, perfect for a commute, and you have a podcast recipe to serve conservatives, political news and opinion junkies, and those who just wonder how on earth we reached the point where so many in our country think patriotism is a dirty word. Please join us at Political Spirits. That's politicalspirits.libsyn.com or on Twitter at Franklin Rye.
A few weeks back, I invited John Fulton onto the podcast to talk about his videos as well as his writing. Well, John's back this week, but this time the conversation involves one of the very best 80s movies, Aliens. I don't think I'm going to get many arguments about that. Now, this podcast recently explored Memory, the origins of Alien, the first film in that franchise, with director Alexandra Philippe. So it's only fitting to kind of let John go deeper into the sequel and find out more about it. I hope you enjoy my conversation with John Fulton about the 1986 film classic Aliens. Well, John, welcome back to the show. You know, you and I were having an email chat sort of behind the scenes, and you mentioned the movie Aliens. Now, an episode or two ago, I did a deep dive into Alien because of the movie Memory, the origins of Alien came out, and I talked to the filmmaker. But obviously, Aliens is another wonderful film, a great sequel, and I think people fight back and forth which one is better. And I'm a little torn. When I watch Aliens, I lean in that direction, but then when I watch the original film, I kind of go back to that side of the fight. So just maybe tell me a little briefly your take on Aliens, either when you first saw it, your initial reaction, why it maybe has sort of grown in your estimation over time. Just we'll start from there.
Well, I think Aliens is interesting because a lot of people compare Alien to Aliens, but I'm not sure that. I think James Cameron went out of his way to make sure that didn't happen. He knew already that he was super impressed by Ridley Scott's film and just wanted to kind of be a part of that world. And when he went into it knowing he was going to make something different. So I think they're both excellent films in different ways. If you want to go just by sheer quality, I guess you could say that Alien probably has the edge on Aliens, but it's almost like Aliens was never really competing for that crown, so it works. Mm-hmm. However, I do think that Aliens is probably the one I like better, just because I'm way more of a combat movie guy. I became interested in Alien because I was interested in Aliens, not the other way around. And I discovered Aliens via my I was kind of trying to reverse engineer the things that I liked, as artists do, and figure out why I liked them. And I would look up things like Halo, or even bits and pieces of Star Wars came before, but there was various bits and pieces of science fiction and military science fiction especially. and video games and even otherwise not really military sci-fi films, like the whole thing where sci-fi kind of tilted a little bit away from ray guns towards bullets. And I liked that direction. It felt very nice and gritty, but I wondered, when did that happen? And it didn't happen first with Aliens. It was Blade Runner came out before that. And, of course, the Deckard's police special was a big part of that. So Ridley even is kind of part of this tilt in science fiction towards a more gritty atmosphere. Mm-hmm. But Aliens is the one where it really he set the gold standard for what a soldier in a science fiction movie needed to be symbolized, and the technical depth that it needed to have. It's just an incredibly influential movie. It's like, you don't have to know it exists, but once I did know it exists, I couldn't stop seeing it. It was everywhere.
Yeah, it really does make sense. I've often cited Alien for creating a creature that essentially influenced every other monster after it, and I don't think any of them really measured up. But you're right, Aliens is a different kind of movie, different presentation, and sort of puts things in a new perspective. And I think when you have a great movie, a landmark movie, and both these films qualify, they leave their mark, whether it's a direct ripoff, whether it's just being influential on other properties and other directors. It does change Hollywood. Talk a little bit, maybe, you've been kind of researching the movie and a lot of the sort of the behind the scenes. Is there anything that maybe people don't know about Aliens that you could recall, something that we don't really talk about at first blush when the conversation comes up?
I think one of the funniest things is just that Sigourney Weaver didn't really know it was going to be an action movie when she got on board. She ended up being one of the greatest, symbolic, action girls of the 80s, and she didn't even really know that was what she was getting into. She kind of showed up on set. I was actually watching some of the behind the scenes earlier, and she said she kind of she has a bad habit of skipping stage directions. And of course, that was where all the details about, she's cocking and loading the gun and doing all this stuff. And it took her a while to get used to that. Yeah. And what's more, she kind of liked it, though. So she could get into the character. She understood it. But she had this line where she said, I don't like that feeling where, after you fire a few rounds, you suddenly feel like you're immortal. And I just thought that was the greatest, because it was like, anyway.
Yeah, maybe that's one of the many reasons why the performance is so good, because she wasn't treating it like an action hero. She was a regular person forced into irregular activity. And I think if the movie were made today, there would be a lot of messaging and female empowerment. But no, she just was a great character, a wonderful hero, and that spoke for itself. And I kind of wish we can go back to that era of movies where you had strong male and female characters without all the finger wagging.
I definitely agree there. It's also especially interesting because there have been so many people who've tried to rip this movie off, or even just the following. I mean, Cameron is known for having strong female leads and significant characters in his films. You can compare Ripley to Sarah Connor in Terminator 2 and or even just in Terminator 1 and etc. And but one of the interesting things, and especially interesting things about Aliens, is that Hollywood, this is the whole idea that you put a female in charge as the lead of an action movie is not a new thing. All right. I know they keep saying it's a new thing. It's not a new thing. It's 50 years old now, but it is very, very difficult because the action genre, like as it came about, was very centered around men. So how do you make one? How do you make an action movie that's centered around a feminine theme? And Aliens is one of the only ones I think that's actually managed to pull it off, which is flying colors. And that's one of the other things that makes it unique. It's one of those things that makes it unique in that nobody else copies that. And yet it's so inherently part of that movie and what makes it so great.
Yeah, and by the way, she has strong maternal instincts in the movie. Her bond with Newt is one of the most beautiful elements, and it doesn't strip away her sexuality or the fact that she's a woman. It's actually makes it even richer. Real quickly, any thoughts on James Cameron? Obviously, he's the kind of guy who takes forever between projects, We're seeing that now with the wait for the Avatar sequels. But anything that in your research about the film jumps out at you about his approach or why he was able to kind of pull off such a masterful film?
I think he's a man with a singular vision, and he's also a perfectionist, both of which I think most artists can kind of identify with. But he basically makes what he wants to make when he wants to make it and how he wants to make it. And if he can't make it how he wants to make it, he waits until he can. You can see that with Avatar. He said, he wrote that thing years and years and years before they had the technology, as he put it, to make it come to life in the way that he wanted it to. It was just impossible. But they had it with Aliens. In fact, Aliens was written. He made the Terminator, or he had written the Terminator and got it approved. Then they had to delay production because Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to do Conan the Destroyer, and that's when Fox hired him to write Alien 2. And he wrote it. They said, if you go and you do a pretty good job with directing Terminator, then maybe we'll consider letting you helm Alien 2. And he went, okay, fine. So he went, he did Terminator. It was great. And that's how he ended up in charge of that movie. But it's always been his modus operandi from the beginning to do stuff his way. And that naturally means that things just tend to take longer, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's often worth the wait. Even though I think a lot of people aren't fans of Avatar, and I've got some real issues with it. There are some spectacular visuals, and the action sequences are phenomenal. One last question. Anything else about Aliens you can share that we haven't touched upon? Other little bits of information that through your research you found?
I think I always have thought particularly that the pulse rifle this technical expertise and depth is seen throughout the entire movie. But the pulse rifle in particular that the Marines carry is, I think, very much kind of like a little microcosm of that, because it interacts with all of the different characters. It has just enough technical details to make it feel real without having to bog us down with exposition. He has a scene where that prop is enabling the relationship between Ripley and Hicks. And I remember watching that scene and going, I'm getting all the gun nerd stuff I want out of this scene. And people who don't care about that are seeing Ripley and Hicks develop their relationship in a way that furthers the plot, in a way that furthers their emotional relationship, in a way that is funny and entertaining to watch. It was just, there's so many things about that thing. When you hand someone a prop, it's so easy to either underdo it or overdo it. And it ends up, pulling the story down. And yet the pulse rifle, as a construction of this movie, enables the plot and doesn't draw too much attention to itself. But it still enables all that that feeling of intensity when you have somebody like if you had thrown a different kind of gun, like maybe the Stormtrooper blaster from Star Wars or something, it's just not going to fit the tone. It's going to change the entire tone of the action scenes. It's going to change the entire tone of the relationships between characters. And the pulse rifle is shaped by the story, not shaping the story.
Yeah,
and that's just I'm just very impressed by that.
And I think a movie that really stands the test of time, which Aliens clearly does, has so many little moments like that. It's not just the alien attacks or the finale or the get away from her, you know what? It's the attention to detail on those quiet moments that makes it all the better. But hey, John, thank you for touching base with this. I love I love kind of digging into movies that I grew up with and that people love, and there's a reason why they connect with us all over again. So I watched it, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was just as spectacular as I remembered. And hey, maybe we'll have you on again to dissect another classic film down the road.
I'd love to. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks again, John.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
As a movie fan, I love hearing stories about filmmakers who refuse to let go of their dream. It could take years and years, sometimes even a decade, to make sure that dream became a reality and to have it put on the screen at long last. That whole mission describes Brian Presley. He's an actor who was drawn to a remarkable true story about the first unofficial Iditarod. One brave Alaskan, played by Presley in this film, traveled 700 miles to the very worst of winter conditions to save a group of children stricken with diphtheria. It's a true story, an amazing one, too. It's also Heroism 101, an inspiring tale that the whole family can cheer. It's called The Great Alaskan Race, and it took Brian about a decade to bring it to the big screen. Now, Brian wrote the film, directed it, he also stars in it, and it's hitting theaters nationwide October 25th. But you can get a little bit of the inside scoop on the film right now. Please welcome writer-director Brian Presley to the HiTcast. Well, Brian, the real story captured in your film is amazing, and I'm thinking, when did you first hear about it, and when did you decide, as someone, an actor, to decide to take it on in such a personal way? You're writing, you're directing, you're starring, obviously a major commitment. So just share a little bit about that part of the backstory here.
Yeah, I came across this story over 9 years ago, and for me, I feel my calling in this business is to tell stories of inspiration, stories of hope, stories that are true, show true heroism. I like watching flawed people overcome unimaginable obstacles, and this story had all the elements, and I immediately knew that I want to tell this story. I set out, to write it, and it's definitely had everybody in town tell me, no, there's no way we're going to let a first-time director direct a movie with dogs, kids, snow, wolves, period piece, and we're for sure not going to let a first-time director be in front of the camera. And I think I was just crazy enough to be the one out doing costume changes at 12,000 feet in the middle of winter, but on the back of a snowmobile.
Yeah.
But it definitely was not an easy task, and but I was when I finally got the opportunity, I was ready. I had spent a good 7 years prepping and really identifying where I can do this, how I can do it for not a studio level budget, and all the elements, the period piece elements, the animals, costume. And so what I love about directing and filmmaking is just the every little detail. There's so many different details from beginning to end that make a good movie. And so to me, I love that. I love, being a director reminds me of being a quarterback of a football team. And, it's a combination of producing and acting, and you're in charge of, the tone of the movie, the story, and, crafting the story. And you also need to know, when to call audibles if stuff isn't working, and change stuff on the fly and adjust to your environment. And so, I couldn't be more thankful and blessed to be able to be a few days away from the movie coming out on 500 screens, and just very thankful.
Yeah. Now, along the way, no one wants a movie like this to take that long to go from the idea to the silver screen. Were there sort of maybe steps you took along the way that maybe you thought, in retrospect, I'm glad it happened this way. Like, I needed that work, I needed that time, or along the way, I actually was able to glean more, learn more, prepare more for the eventual shoot?
You know what? Every step of the way made me prepared and was all guided by a bigger hand. And so probably the most thing I'm glad of why it took so long and it went down the path that it went down is, my little girl was able to play my daughter in the movie. And so it was awesome being able to have that experience with my own daughter, with her playing my daughter in the movie. And, I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. I had looked at different, girls but dealing with, some of the parents of these kids. And I just knew that my little girl had it in her, and we haven't really let her do many things in the industry. Just out of wanting her to be a kid, but it was a few weeks up with me, and she was really wanting to do it, and And she came in. I was afraid she might get up there and go, "No, Daddy, I don't want to say that," or "Daddy, I don't want to," but that didn't happen. So she does a great job in the movie, and that'll be an experience we'll be able to cherish for the rest of our lives.
Oh gosh, yeah, so that's an amazing way this thing's turned out. Now I understand, obviously, the movie is set in Alaska, but you shot in Colorado. Talk about dealing with the terrain. The temperatures are obviously significant. You've got to take care of the children on the set. You've got the dogs. You've got so many different factors. How do you prepare for a cold weather shoot like this?
Yeah, it definitely was. Preparation was key. I mean, we had picked Silverton, Colorado, which Silverton and Ouray area is, some of very similar terrain as Alaska, but a lot more accessible. And so the town of Silverton opened their arms up to us. We utilized a lot of the people in that community for the movie. We kind of came in during a kind of a dead period, post holidays, and so it was a good thing for their community as well. And they had but we were in the elements. I mean, the storm. We didn't have the budget to recreate snow, but I mean, I wanted the real elements. I wanted the movie to have a real feeling to it. And I wanted visually the disease of diphtheria, it suffocates the airways. And so I wanted the storm to mirror that, what the disease is doing. It's happening also to the mushers on the trail. And most of us know of a blizzard or a snowstorm, but 80 below zero is a completely different animal. And so we shot in the elements, and then we also added elements in post. And I wanted the storm to have to feel like a storm that we've never felt. And, all the way down to the sound design of the storm. I wanted moments where it hits you right in the face and we're in it and we can feel it as the audience, and moments where, we just let the visual play and we, pull the sound out. And so, sound design, we really spent a lot of time really making sure that was correct.
Now, a movie like this, you've got creative license, you got to tell a compelling story, so there are certain changes to the true tale that went on. Was there anything that happened in reality that you weren't able to kind of squeeze into the film that you wish you did, or anything you can share like that? Because I'm sure there are lots of facets to the original tale.
Looking at it today, there's nothing that I would. We ended up having too much that we had to trim down the movie. So there's really, if I could say I want to go back and redo one thing, there's not really anything I want to go back and redo. I believe that's the beauty of art is, some of these scenes, there's stuff that I had written that I go, let's just toss this out. I want you to talk to this little girl, and she's desiring a mother, and you love this child, and talk to her about the new dress you're making and her dad coming back, and Togo's going to come back with the medicine. We created a beautiful scene. And so, part of an actor I've learned is you got to learn to be in the moment and work moment to moment. And, that really helped me as a director to be able to allow myself to communicate with the actors on, and trust your instincts as a storyteller, and also know when to trust your actors and let them do what they do best. Bring this character to life and make it your own. And, I welcome ideas. I want ideas. I want your, if you want to climb the wall in the scene, let's try it. I'll tell you if it doesn't work, but I like actors that take risks. And so, I wanted to create that environment for all my actors that, this is a creative environment, and I want you to feel free to trust your instincts. That's what's gotten me to where I'm at. And so I don't like working in confined creative, mindsets or spaces. I like having that freedom. Even if it is a wrong choice, I'd rather you take a chance and take a risk. So
When I was watching your film, I thought this is old-fashioned, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just felt like a hero's journey, a classic tale. And I feel like in entertainment today, we're often drawn to the anti-heroes, the Walter Whites, the Tony Sopranos, the Suicide Squads, Joker, which came out a few weeks ago. Was part of the appeal of this project that this is a heroic journey. This is something where you can watch with the family and get inspired from. You mentioned that's sort of your overall mission as a filmmaker, but talk about it sort of as, I don't want to say an antidote, but maybe sort of a swimming against the Hollywood tide, because I feel like this is a different kind of movie today, whereas maybe 20, 30 years ago, it would have been part of the zeitgeist.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, for me, it's very easy for these types of stories for the narrative to be about the event. And for me, like I said, I like to focus storytelling on character first, event second. And, where I can get on board, I can relate to this person, I can relate to the journey. I'm, immediately sucked in because I'm won over by the characters that I'm watching versus like, my problem with like the Black Hawk Downs of the world, which is, a very historical event, but, I'm watching the movie and you kind of don't know who's who, and they're trying to cover way too many storylines. And so I never really get emotionally invested in one. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it'd be a bad example, but, I believe there needs to be more of these types of stories. I like watching heroicism come from the average Joe. And one of the coolest things that's about this whole journey and, all the different test screenings and festivals is, there seems to be, the response has been really amazing in the sense that people are like, we want more of these kinds of movies. I think there's a hunger for these kinds of movies, and what, in my experience in trying to get it made, the studio's like, unless Clint Eastwood's directing and Matt Damon starring, we're not making the movie. It's a period piece. How do we sell this? And, so for me, I believe, there is a niche. We're not making art house movies, but we're not making Avengers. And, I believe there's a niche and there's a hunger for these types of movies. Yeah. And so, that's our goal, is to continue to make them. In the same breath, we're using the movie to impact causes that we believe are impacting lives, which is the whole message of the company and the message of the movie. We have Battle Dogs, which is in Alaska. They're taking men and women who are veterans who suffer from severe PTSD, taking them up into Alaska, associating them with sled dogs, nature. They have this whole program that they're saving lives. We have Hope is Alive, which is a addiction recovery program that is changing lives. We have a Champions Club that is a special needs program for special needs children, special needs families, that's in curriculum in churches and schools around the world. Amazing program. We have a rescue mission right here in Beverly Hills that, they have a huge husky adoption effort going on right now, because huskies, there's a large number similar to like pit bulls in shelters. And part of it's because these dogs need to be in the climate. People think, oh, I want a husky. And, huskies are great dogs, but, a husky in 100-degree heat, is, I'd want to pull my hair out too. And so, yeah, we're trying to use the movie to give back, and all these nonprofits are getting, each 1% off the very top. And, where we have the Iditarod, the Bear Grease. We have, I wanted to get the dog sledding community behind us. To me, the heart of it is a dog sledding movie, and dog sledding is still very much a big part of people's livelihood. These races, dogs who run the Iditarod, I mean, they're professional athletes. I mean, this is what they're born to do. They love it. I mean, when you go to hook up a dog team, they're all jumping and going, "Put me in, coach, put me in, coach." And, you know, they truly are at peace when they're out in these elements. Yeah. And so, you know, we're trying to help bring light on what they're doing, the sport, and, you know, get eyeballs who normally wouldn't be looking at that, may want to go check it out. We have some of the top Iditarod mushers coming down to the premiere. So trying to make it a community. The movie's about community. And so we're trying to echo that as we go out into the marketplace where, you know, rallying communities behind the causes we're giving back, behind the sport, behind the subject matter of the movie, because that's really the heart of the piece.
Yeah. If you were talking to a fellow director who was about to work with dogs on screen, you just went through that experience. What would you tell him or her as sort of advice or things you learned along the way?
Well, you know, I had people tell me over the years, well, you need to have a movie trained dog. You need a movie trained dog, and then you need to have a sled dog trained dog. And, you know, everybody's going to give you opinion. And for me, I had to go experience and find it myself. And, you know, I knew I needed dogs around kids, but, you know, the dogs weren't going to be talking in the movie. And so, you know, having the right mindsets, the right animal wrangler who, we had a great gal who was out of Minnesota. It was her dogs. And, you know, she had the mindset, and we treated her dogs like they were our kids. I mean, they all slept in the hotel with her. And so, you know, approach is everything. And, you know, and prep, and really knowing. We did a test shoot when I first was about to get it financed. I had to do a test shoot to show that, I wanted to do one so that our camera team could know how we were going to work with the dogs, which we quickly realized that we need snowmobiles. And then we quickly realized we need people who know how to really drive these snowmobiles, and we could put cameras in certain locations. And snowmobiles were a part of our everyday transpo. And, but I cut together a teaser from that little shoot, and that's how I got the movie greenlit. And, you know, but aside from it getting the movie greenlit, it was extremely helpful and helped us prep so that we were ready on the day, on how to shoot them. And we were ready with all the snowmobiles, and we weren't figuring out then. And so, you know, just prep is key. And it took me years to identify, okay, how do I make this movie in 1925 but not have to go build Nome, Alaska? Silverton's surrounded by mountains. I have a friend who is from one of the largest visual effects companies who started his own. And, you know, he came in and did all of our visual effects. We had over 380 visual effects shots. One of the things was removing all those mountains so that it felt like Nome, Alaska, right on the edge of the coast. In the northern part of Alaska. So all those elements, you know, figuring out how you're going to go from A to Z. Some of these elements I had in place 4 years prior to even making the movie. And I knew I had, you know, there's a small window you can make this movie in a year. And it has to be in snow, in winter, and in those conditions. And so, you know, there would be years where we'd almost get there, but then we'd be too late. So everything happens for a reason, I believe, and it all aligned in the end. And you know, persistence pays off, and you know, in this business, like I tell young people, you know, we're going around talking to different schools, and you know, you can't take no for an answer. And passion is what's gotten me through, you know, the ups and downs of this career. And passion for storytelling and making these kinds of movies that I believe, you know, it's been really fun to watch families come into the theater and into churches to watch this movie, and the kids love it just as much as the parents. You know, I have 3 kids, and there's not many movies out there today that you can go see with your kids where kids love it just as much as the parents. And so,
You've done just that here. Brian, I have one last question.
Yeah.
I mentioned before sort of the old-fashioned element of this. Again, I say it as a positive. It also reminded me there's such a conversation going on in the culture about masculinity and what it means to be a man and toxic masculinity. And I thought your character is old school. He doesn't talk a lot. He doesn't share a lot. His actions speak for him. Is any thoughts about that element of the film and sort of as part of the ongoing conversation we're having? Because he's not a 21st century guy by any stretch of the imagination, but he's getting the job.
I think, heroes don't need to tell you they're heroes, and people who are strong don't need to tell you they're strong. And I like subtlety. I like, but I also like flawed human beings. I mean, I wanted to show this isn't a perfect person. Here's a man who, tragedy hit. And here's a hardened man who is now left in those days, a man who's working in the mines and he's off working. Now he's left also doing that and raising a little girl. And, the little girl's starving for, you can see female affection and, all these little layers that I wanted, that I believe you can relate to today. And that also make him human. So when he does the unimaginable, it also is a reminder that, our human nature can go much further than what our mind says we can do. And, that will to survive, that will to, and, there's no mountain. If you ask any parent, if you're going to go save your children, there's no mountain you wouldn't cross. 80 below zero, let's go, to save your children. And, I think that drive too is what really, got him through those times where, the odds, when you look at science, they shouldn't have made it. That serum never should have made it. And so it's a true miracle story. But I wanted to create that character driven arc, so that, sometimes it takes, when we're in ruts in life, and, I speak from my own experience, things to wake us up and remember that, we're not promised tomorrow, and you got to, live life, and life's not always fair, and, but how you face your obstacles and your enemies is what ultimately defines you. And, you're going to get punched, but you got to get up and keep punching. And fight back. And so, I think those things are all relatable elements in the movie that I think, whether you're 1925 or you're 2019, especially the adult audience can relate to.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, I mean, you went through a very different experience than this story, but just the uphill battle to get this made is amazing, and congratulations on that. And again, the movie is The Great Alaskan Race. It's hitting theaters everywhere October 25th. Brian, thank you for joining the HiTcast. Congratulations on the film. And if you really want an old-fashioned movie in the very best sense of the word that inspires and entertains, is good for the whole family, here you go. It's right here. So go check it out. Pleasure to have you on the show, Brian, and I'm sure we'll be talking down the road again.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for your support on the film.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.